What is going on, guys? In this video today, we're going to be going over 6 aim mistakes that console Fortnite players commonly make. I feel like when it comes to aiming, it's a lot harder to pinpoint things that you're doing wrong compared to a mechanic like building or editing. Everything happens so fast, and even just a few centimeters can be the difference between a hit or a miss. Unless you really sit down and analyze slow motion footage, it's hard to understand some of the things you're doing that can be hurting you in aim fights. So based on what I've seen, the mistakes in this video affect players of every skill level, so no matter how good or bad you are, this should still help you, and without further ado, let's get right into it. Alright, so the first aim mistake that a lot of players make is not leading their shots when they shoot an AR at the enemy. In case you're unfamiliar with that term, leading your shot refers to positioning your crosshairs slightly ahead of where the enemy is in the direction that they're moving. Even though the ARs in Fortnite are hit scan weapons, which means the bullets have no travel time, it's still a good idea to shoot towards the side of the enemy's body in whichever direction they're moving. Take this clip as an example. Since the enemy was sprinting to his left, initially I positioned my crosshair not directly in the middle of his body, but actually a little to that left side. Then when he stopped sprinting, I simply readjust and put the crosshair back in the middle since he's no longer moving. Because of the way I handled that, if he had kept sprinting, my crosshair would have been positioned perfectly to track him and continue hitting shots, and even though he stopped, it's no big deal to adjust to a non-moving enemy. If you're someone who always positions the crosshair right in the middle, you may hit the first shot or two, but eventually the enemy will sort of outrun your crosshair, and then you'll need to flick it to catch up to them, which is not something you want to do. The next type of aim mistake that console players frequently make is overusing their SMG. And this is actually so common that I want to talk about 2 separate mistakes that stem from this. The first one is overestimating the strength of aim assist with SMGs. Now I totally get that this may sound a little crazy because in this current meta, getting right in your enemy's face and shooting them with an SMG is undeniably OP. In that situation I just described, aim assist will basically aim for you and prevent you from missing any shots, and if you watch competitive Fortnite at all, that's basically how even the majority of controller pros are playing right now. However, I believe that barrel stuffing with SMGs being super OP has led to a lot of players going really overboard with it. The first thing you need to know to understand why is that at anything outside of point blank range, if you aren't ADSing, aim assist really doesn't help you all that much. Just imagine a 1x1 box for a second. That's obviously a super small area, but if you're on one side of a 1x1 and your enemy's on the other side, the amount of aim assist that you'll get with an SMG if you're just firing from the hip is almost nothing. So many times in that exact situation, I'll watch one of my friends spray their SMG while not ADSing because in their mind the enemy's right in front of them, but then they'll miss a bunch of shots, they'll get cracked with a shotgun, end up dying, and then they'll start raging like, bro, that's so dumb, I thought linear was so OP, but I guess not because I missed all those shots. It's really as simple as this. If you aren't within about an imaginary arm's length from the enemy you're shooting at, you shouldn't be non-ADSing with an SMG. The only exception being if it's the mythic drum gun, because that's just insane. If the enemy's just outside that imaginary arm's length of distance, like in the 1x1 box example I just gave, you either want to ADS with your SMG or use your shotgun. I think this specific tip is especially important for console players because your aim assist is even weaker than what the PC on controller pros get. So just because you see Unknown or Scope get away with non-ADS spraying an SMG outside of point blank range, that doesn't necessarily mean you'd get the same result if you tried it on console. The next mistake that console players make involving SMG overuse is switching away from their shotgun too quickly. This is a mistake that people have been making since the very beginning of Fortnite, but with SMGs being as strong as they are and shotguns being as weak as they are, it's more common now than ever before. Here's a common situation where people make this mistake all the time. They'll see an enemy maybe 3 to 5 meters away, hit them with their shotgun for something like 30 to 50 blue damage, and then they'll immediately whip out their SMG and just start mindlessly spraying. The whole purpose of an SMG, unless again you're touching your enemy's body, is to use it as a cleanup weapon. Unless it's the mythic drum gun, I don't want an SMG in my hand unless I know the enemy's under about 50 to 60 total health. Most decent players will only give you about a split second to hit a shot in close range fights before they build to protect themselves, so unless you know that enemy's super weak, you're gonna want the shots you hit to be shotgun shots. The next aim mistake that console players frequently make is shooting every AR the same way. Here's what I mean by that. In Fortnite, the rarity of the AR that you're using affects the amount of bloom and bullet spread that you get while shooting it. I believe I mentioned that in one or two videos before, but that's something that a lot of even really experienced players don't know because it's so hard to tell unless you specifically look for it. So how does that knowledge impact how you want to use certain ARs? Well, a general rule of thumb is that the lower the rarity of the AR, the more you want to tap fire it and take advantage of first shot accuracy. If you try full spraying a white AR at a guy who's 50 meters or so away, you're probably not going to hit many shots. However, with a gold scar on the other hand, your results will be a lot better. So that's why your best bet with the lower rarity ARs when the enemy is further away is to shoot them a lot slower so the bloom and bullet spread stay relatively under control. And I think it should go without saying that this doesn't really apply to certain special ARs like the heavy AR. With that weapon, it could be platinum rarity and the bloom would still get way out of control almost instantly if you don't tap fire it. Aim mistake number 5 is one that applies to all weapons, but it's definitely most important when you're using a shotgun. When a lot of players are sprinting or even just walking, they won't put their crosshair at body or head level. For some reason, it just feels normal to sort of look downwards when you're moving forward in Fortnite. I've never actually heard an explanation that totally makes sense, but my theory is that it makes your vision slightly better because your crosshair and weapon isn't blocking a part of what's in front of you. Now, it's totally fine to do this when you're just walking around in the open when no enemies are near you, but when you anticipate that an enemy is about to walk in front of you, you need to force yourself to move your crosshair higher up. If you just keep it at the typical walking or running level, which is right about at the enemy's knees, then if they pop onto your screen, you're gonna have to do some kind of crazy flick up to try to hit their body or head. Flick shotting on controller is difficult enough, and it's darn near impossible on console. So the much better alternative is to instead keep the crosshair at body level while moving, so that way there's no flick needed when the enemy appears. This is especially important when you're running through doors and stairs. Smart players will pre-aim these spots since they know you're going to be coming from there if you're chasing them, so if you're looking towards the ground, they're going to melt you unless you end up hitting that miracle flick. The next aim-based mistake that a lot of players make is never ADSing with their shotgun. So the thing is, it's almost always better to hip fire with a shotgun than to ADS. That's a common tip that a lot of people know. ADSing obviously slows down the speed you move, prevents you from jumping, and just in general makes you a much easier target to hit. It used to be a little beneficial to ADS back when Legacy was in the game and you got that snap-on effect with shotguns, but sadly that's no longer an option. But there is still one main situation where the obviously correct play is to ADS with a shotgun, yet many people never do. And that situation is when you're shooting at an enemy who either isn't looking at you or just isn't in a position to return fire. I really don't think this needs a ton of explanation, honestly. I just talked about how all the negative effects of ADSing with a shotgun revolve around movement, speed, and ability, but if you're not at a threat of being shot, then that really doesn't matter. So that's great because ADSing does give you some important positives, most notably a tighter pellet spread, which makes it a lot more likely for you to deal more damage if you hit a clean shot. So if you're someone who hits a lot of 30 or 40 pumps at close range, it may be because you're not ADSing with your shotgun when you should be. I feel like all that is kinda obvious, but for some reason, a lot of players get so in the habit of not ADSing with shotguns that they never do it even when it's clearly the right play, and that's a mistake that you definitely want to avoid. point. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you watched the entire thing, be sure to let me know with a comment down in the comment section below. What's an aim mistake that you feel like you frequently make while playing Fortnite? Be sure to leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe, turn on post notifications, do whatever the heck you want, and I will catch you guys next time.